Now we move to the seventh and last principle, which is creating a lifestyle that supports RDI and dynamic intelligence. Now, this is an area that we really added on as a result of the research data that we were getting back from families that we were following concerning what really made the difference in their success. Originally, we emphasized working in what we might call a lab environment that's very minimal, has very little stimulation and distraction. But what we found was this: our most successful families spent a few hours in more of a lab setting when they introduced new objectives or working on difficult things. But the secret of their success was that from the very beginning, they were practicing RDI principles all throughout the day. What they learned was that rather to create an artificial setting where you're just going through a series of drills or activities, that the activities of daily life, if we slowed down and if we knew what to emphasize and what to spotlight, were the most important things of all. So based on this, we really had to do a change in what we thought of was effective in RDI. And that's part of the process, the dynamic system that is RDI. We continue to learn and develop and become more effective. So now we emphasize right from the beginning the need to create an RDI lifestyle. The most important piece of this is to move out of a sense of crisis and reactivity. We see so many families that have child diagnosed with autism, and even years later, they're still operating on a day-to-day survival basis. How do I get through today? How do I survive? What do I do if the child does this? What do I do if the child does that? Every bit of their energy is tied up into just getting through. And as a result, they have no ability then, they have no energy left over to think of the long term, to think about what kind of person they're going to produce, to think about whether the effort they're spending is going to make a difference in their child's ability to be independent, get a job, have real friendships. So we have to help people get away from that crisis mentality. Some of the people we see, some of the couples we see at our parent intensive trainings, which last for 4 days, have never been away from their child since their child's been born. This is their first few days away. And it's amazing what kind of perspective they begin to get just by being away for a few days. Along with getting out of crisis, we teach families how to prioritize and simplify their lives. Doesn't mean that everyone should go back to nature and quit their jobs and live on a commune. But it does mean that you need to take a look, and a rather intense look, at your priorities. We see families that are doing so many different therapies that the only time they have with their child is driving in a car from therapy to therapy. Well, you can't be an effective guide or parent if that's the limit of your ability. And those families are going to have to scale back and create some period of life. You know, I jokingly say to people, the biggest obstacle our families have in doing RDI is that they don't have a life. How do you teach children in a daily lifestyle when you have no life? So the first thing we have to make sure is that every family has a life. And that means that everything isn't sacrificed and revolving around the child's autism. It means that there's time to slow down and help your apprentice learn to work with you in raking the leaves or sweeping the floor or preparing a meal. That everything isn't just a means to an end, but that there is a time and pace to work on the critical objectives that are going to make a difference down the line. It also means that there's time and energy to create lots and lots of moments of productive uncertainty. Right? Lots of moments where there are decisions to be made, where there has to be referencing, where we have to coordinate, right? And those can occur all throughout the day. Our families have shown us that any routine event in the day is a wonderful opportunity to practice productive uncertainty. Another critical step related to getting out of crisis is to make sure that every member of the family is feeling okay, that no one is sacrificing for the child's autism. What we find is that when a family is feeling stress, it's the most vulnerable member who's going to experience that the most. So if you're stressed out, if your quality of life is poor, don't be surprised if the child with autism is having stress as well. On the other hand, if the child goes off to school every day and is overwhelmed, don't expect that you're going to be able to come home and be a guide for that child to work on the most difficult things in the world for them, dealing with productive uncertainty, learning to function in dynamic systems. They have to have a daily life that leaves them some energy, right, so that they can practice these very difficult things for them. Don't wait until the child is exhausted to do that. Now, parents often ask me, well, we don't know what to do in terms of a daily life. What are the types of activities that would be useful for introducing productive uncertainty? And so tongue-in-cheek, I made this list for people of the types of things they could do. And please don't take this literally, because what it is just a representation of anything you might be able to do, as long as you take the time to not rush from a means to an end, and as long as you know what your objectives are, what you want to spotlight. So we talk about eating and drinking, cooking, bath time, taking out the garbage, doing the laundry, washing the car, sweeping floors, gardening, bike rides, and you can see the list. It's every possible thing that you might be able to do together. People wonder, well, does this mean that the child isn't going to do anything independently? They're going to do everything as an apprentice? And the answer is no. We want you to make two different lists. One, a list of things you want the apprentice to learn to do on their own. Right? So your goal there is to teach them to be independent. But another list is of daily activities that you're going to use as a backdrop for guiding them into greater and greater levels of dynamic intelligence. And it really doesn't matter which is on the list, although some things are obvious. You know, dressing yourself clearly should be on the independent list. On the other hand, things like doing the laundry, washing the car, can be things that you reserve for apprenticeship. Again, the goal is not for the person to learn to wash the car, although that's a very nice perk, isn't it, that you get. It's to use that activity and to spotlight increasingly complex, right, functioning and dynamic systems as you add elements of complexity to that activity in a very slow and gradual way. People say, well, what if I just don't know what to do? And I say, well, you can always go on a walk. And here's a good example of a number of things. I'm not going to go into the in-depth explanation of them, but just an example of many, many things you could do just with something simple as taking a walk. And these are all things that have been contributed by our families. And there's many, many more examples on our website. So almost anything you do together can be turned into an opportunity for guiding and for learning about dynamic systems.